guys, welcome back to another Parts Factory Australia installation tutorial video. Today we're working on this Hyundai Getz. Specifically, we're going to be changing the thermostat housing. Now, it is a bit of an involved job. There are a few pieces we're going to have to move out of our way in order to access in where it's situated on the side of the engine. But don't worry about it too much. We're literally just going to be moving the battery, the intake pipe, and the air box. I'll show you how to do all of it. You're going to need 12mm socket on a little wrench, 10mm sockets and spanners, etc, etc. I'll run you through it all as we go. Just before we start, guys, I've got two things to remind you. We do have this product available on our website, partsfactoryaustralia.com.au. I'll stick the link in the bio of the video, the description of the video. Guys, if you need it, we're going to deliver it to you anywhere in Australia. I think it's $78.30 on the website, and we're going to try and deliver it overnight, free express post, but you really can't go wrong doing it that way. The only thing you are going to need is the gasket. You can get that from any shop such as Super Cheap Auto, Burson's Auto Parts, etc, etc, etc. So go ahead, order your part, grab your gasket, and you're good to go. Oh, one last thing, guys. Very happy to announce that Parts Factory Australia has changed its address. We're now here in Mollendina. We've upgraded to a factory or a warehouse 3 times the size of our last one. I'll give you a quick look. Alrighty guys, located here in Mollendina, here's a little tour of our brand new warehouse. Obviously, if you follow us guys, this might interest you, and if you're just here to learn how to fit that thermostat housing, you're welcome to skip this part. Pretty cool, hey? Little front counter. Already set up all of our racking. Leo's obviously very excited. All of our racking. Got a little gym. Wrapping station. And the bit that I love the most is the back area. A bit more exciting than our last warehouse. Alrighty Leo, let's get into the fit, eh? Alright, so the thermostat housing is located under here. Now you might be changing this because you've been told you have a thermostat housing leak, and don't be surprised because that's extremely normal. And I'll show you what I mean once we're in there, where it leaks from. But basically, these little hoses here, and here, they can actually rust because obviously these cars are about 15 years old, so they rust and snap off. Or you've got an issue with your thermostat, or you've got an issue with the gasket on the back of the thermostat housing, etc, etc. So one of those reasons is going to be making you require to change this part. So I'll show you how to do it. So get a nice torch, set it up so you can see what you're doing. First things first, let's remove this battery. 10mm, 13mm. Take your negative terminal off, stick it out of the way. Positive terminal out of the way. Down the bottom there, you'll have a 12mm little battery clamp that you should be able to see. Sticking all your sockets up along the little sill here, 12mm. Then you can lift your battery out, stick it up out of the way. You can now see in here a little bit better. So you have these 12mm just here. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to just pull that battery box out of the way, sticking the bolts and the battery clamp with it. We're going to remove this air box. 10mm socket, just here. 1 and 2 here. And that air box will now just wiggle around like that. And then up the back over there, you'll see that 10mm where the torch is shining. Undo that 10mm and then take this little clamp here, alligator clamp, with a pair of pliers, and then that entire airbox should pull out. Loosen off that clamp down the back, and then as I said, use a pair of pliers to undo that alligator clip. Just like so, giving this hose a little wiggle, popping it off, then put your hand down the back. Can be a little difficult, but once it's moving, you'll find it'll just pop off, and if it doesn't, loosen it off a bit more. There you go. Once I loosen it off a bit more, it was then free to be pulled off. And then lift your whole box up and out of the way. Alright guys, we're now down where the thermostat housing resides, and as you can see, you have your two main hoses that connect to the thermostat housing. It looks like you got 4 12mm bolts that pulls the thermostat housing cap off. We'll then pull the thermostat housing cap and the hoses out of our way, and that's when you'll access your actual thermostat housing itself. So let's jump into that in a second. Now before you go any further guys, if you've just been driving this car, it's now time to let the car cool down. There should be no heat in these hoses whatsoever to continue this job. Alrighty guys, so when you undo the hoses that connect to your thermostat housing, you're gonna lose coolant. So make sure you put a little tub under the Getz to collect all the coolant as it falls. And if you can, put a little towel under the tub, because you're not gonna capture it all. That way, you can just pull the tub out, pull up your towel, throw it in the wash, and you got no cleanup, which is much more convenient than sitting there scrubbing for the next half an hour. Alrighty, so I'm waiting for my car to cool down. There's really nothing else I can show you in this meantime. But other than that, guys, if you can, make sure you thumbs up the video, and if you can, subscribe to the channel. Obviously, I don't have to tell you why. That's a great thing for me. Help me out. And yeah, other than that, I'll see you back in 5 minutes. Alrighty guys, so I left the car overnight, and now it's obviously all cooled down, able for me to get in there and work on the area. Now before we go any further, I wanted to let you know that these little plugs here on this coil pack, due to their location, their close proximity to these high pressure hoses, they're extremely brittle. You do not want to touch them at all. You literally leave it there. Don't even, you're going to actually have to avoid them really, isn't it? Because they're quite, as we're going to pull that housing out, you're going to run into them. Now, further in the video, you might find I might actually move this coil pack out of the way. Not sure yet. We're going to get through it and see what's required to get the job done safely. Okay, so the next step is to remove these little cables out of our way as far as we can. And you can see all this wirings here, and it attaches to this little 12mm down here. So I'm going to pull that 12mm first. And you can see now that that'll actually kind of move out of our way just a tad. Now I'm just going to undo this little wire zip tie to the wiring loom. I just want to basically be able to get in there a little bit easier. So I'm going to see if I can get this wiring loom. Yeah, so you can see that plug there has actually was already broken, etc. So now that that one's already broken, it might be worth removing the other one nice and gently. We got that one off without breaking it. And now we can actually move all this wiring out of the way and get in there a bit easier. Just using a pair of pliers, you can come in underneath and squeeze that little plug, and it'll actually pull out of that little surround just like that. You can see you've got the same thing around here. You've got all these. I've actually also got a 10mm little earthing strap, which you're going to pull that off as well, just here. basically I want to get all these wires out of the way so that we can get in there a little easier and make sure we don't make any mistakes, as this is a crucial part of the cooling system. Same thing here. Just going to see if we can, yeah, so that popped out like that, and then this just sits here. So I'm going to unplug this plug, which is also very brittle, so you want to be very careful while we're getting around doing all this. You can see all of the wires are starting to wiggle around a bit easier. We got one down here which can just be unplugged, and you got one to your cat, or your oxy sensor rather, which can be unplugged. And it seems there's one more. So we've unplugged all those little wires. Now you can see we've got a much better access to the area we're working on. It's still not very good. You can still see that it's going to be quite difficult to get in here and work on that area, but we'll push forward, continue going, and see what we discover. All right, it's now time to use your pliers in the wide setting. Crimp down on these little alligator crimp. One, and you're going to have one down there as well, which might be a bit harder to access. So I've just removed this little alligator clamp. Now we're going to see if we can gently, without breaking anything, pull these hoses off. And as we said, you're going to lose some coolant. I'm going to gently bend it up and out of the way, not too far that it snaps your radiator. So that's one of the hoses off the main housing. Yeah, it looks like we've got two more to do. Get the 12mm back out again. We've got 12mm here. This little plate is causing me a bit of dramas, so I'm going to remove it. Remove that out of my way. Remember, we're putting all of our little screws up the top and out of our way. 1, 2, 3, and the fourth is down here. Bit of a longer one, that one. Right, so now that we've got all the bolts out, you'll find that this housing, the cap of the housing, will actually just pop off. Now, you can use a big flathead screwdriver. So placing your flathead screwdriver, try and line it up the crack of the housing, because then you can just give it a nice tap like that and you can see it separates. Once it separates like that, the rest can be done gently by hand, like so, and your additional coolant will begin to fall out. Now we're going to need to clean up this housing cap. There is a gasket already on it, and it looks like my gasket seems to be in good condition. Someone's used a bit of gasket glue for additional sealing in the past. You can see our little housing a lot better now, much better access. So what I've done is I've tucked the housing cap out of the way. You can see someone has also removed the thermostat in the past as well. Possibly a sign that this motor has had head gasket issues or overheating issues in the past. Alrighty, so we're now at the final stage of our job. You can see in here, and you can see where these are all leaking. There's probably hairline cracks in a lot of these outlets, etc, etc. That's why we're throwing our new one on. First things first, you've got this large pipe here, but it looks like it might be easier if we remove this housing and we can maneuver the whole thing, then get all the pipes. So we're going to use our little 12mm again. Same thing, you got a 12mm up here. This time they're actually nuts, not bolts. So chuck it up out of our way. You got one there, You got one over here. Throwing it up, out of the way. It seems there's only two 12mm bolts that fix that entire housing to the block. So at that point, yep, there you go. She comes loose. Now you can slide the whole housing back and forth, and we can access these hose clamps much easier. Giving everything a wipe down. You don't want to be spreading oil all through where you're working. I'm going to drag the entire housing out. I'm going to clamp down, trying not to damage anything in the process. Clamping down on that, I'm going to wiggle it, bring it back on the hose, and it's time to free it up a bit wider on the old pliers. Hopefully we can just clamp down on the hose, give it a wiggle. She wiggles there like that. Once the hose is wiggling, you can then just pull that pipe off again. It might be cooling in there, there might not be. No, it's all nice and dry now. A little bit came out. Now you've got all your back ones. Sure, they're looking self-explanatory. Guys, have a look at that. That alligator clamp is actually not on that hose there, which could be the culprit of a lot of the leaking we can see going on. Using our little pliers, we'll take the small one first. If you can't fully reach it, you can kind of grab the clamp and sometimes drag it around a bit so you can reach it a bit better. Pulling it back off the hose like that. You can see that just came off. You got one here, twist, and then spreading out your pliers into a wider position in order to grab. And again, it's the same thing. We're going to give it a twist. There you go. Pulling it off. You can see it's pretty straightforward at this point. The hardest part was at the start. The rest is just a bit fidgety and a bit tight, but I'm sure you guys can endure. And give the pipe a little bit of a twist, sometimes putting our pliers back into the wider setting again. Giving the hose a twist, you can see that as soon as we do that, it makes it significantly easier to slide the pipe off. It's a trade secret. Guys, the last one, little tiny one. Give her a squeeze, take it back, and as I said, then give the hose a little crimp and a twist. A little bit of a twist, hopefully you can get in there with your pliers. I'm struggling a bit. I'm going to move my little clamp back a bit further by the looks of things. And then once you got the clamp back, of course, you can just pull that whole housing off and voila. Alrighty guys, I just want you to have a quick look down in the hole down there. That is where our little housing attached to. Now you can see that my gasket's still in perfect order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brand new housing here. You can see that the surfaces are all ready to go. Already obviously machined down, ready to go. We are going to use some of this gasket maker and sealant, just a tiny bit. I'm going to stick it around here, and then I'm going to reinstall this bad boy, smack these hoses back on, making sure all the little alligator clips are clamped well, nice and flush, all the hoses are properly sealed. Then I'm going to do the same thing around the edge of this one. The gasket is still in good nick on my other one. Then I'm going to, what else am I going to do? I'm not putting a thermostat back in mine. There's obviously a reason why the ex-owner took theirs out. But chuck a new thermostat in it. Make sure it's up the right way. The fat end of the thermostat goes into the hole there. It will help with your heating and cooling cycle, so definitely don't skip that part. Then we're going to come back over here. We're going to find our cap which is this, I'm going to get a new gasket for that, and I'm going to use some sandpaper, sand back the surface so that yeah, it obviously seals correctly. You don't want to do the job half-assed. Guys, you just apply a very thin layer around the whole edge of it, covering every part of it, because even one tiny little leak and you'll be pulling it back off again. Right, so before you go ahead and put your new housing back where it belongs, I've obviously done all of the gasket glue around the new housing, and then I'm going to give this area a nice dry. The surface needs to be perfectly dry. Alrighty guys, so you've dried all the surface. It's now time to reinstall our housing. Making sure for the final time that you have enough blue goo all around the edges. It needs to have a bit of thickness to it so that it's kind of like a big sealer. Alright, so let's grab our little housing. Move all our hoses out of the way because they're going to wet it. We don't want it being wet, we want everything being nice and dry. We're going to bring our housing down. We're going to line up our bolt holes. Once you've lined your bolt holes up, you're going to grab your large hose, bring it back. I'm going to slide it over at the same time that we push the housing in, sealing it up nice and firm. Okay guys, now what I want you to do, so I want you to grab your nuts, and immediately we are going to put them on. I'm not going to let it sit because I do not want any of the moisture. Moving around and stuffing with our sealant. Guys, so you tighten it, majority of it by hand, and then use your wrench. We're going to evenly tighten it up, side to side. You can see how I've done the top first, but I didn't get any ratchet action first. And now we're going to finish the job with a bit of tightening. And two. There you go. Alrighty, so it is now time to begin to put all of our little hose clamps back on. Obviously with our pair of pliers. I'm just going to bring this one around a bit so I can access it a bit better. You can see how you can just drag it. Then you've got your big pliers. Make sure the pliers that you're using actually have a grip on the top. Otherwise you're going to be slipping off over and over again. Spread them out to their lightest function for this big part. Crimping down on it. You can just drag it forward. Let it go nice and gently right where it once was. It's now time to put our other hoses on, but there would be a bit of an order you want to follow. Obviously that's because it's not exactly that easy to get in there. So I'm going to put this top one on first and get that sitting flush, and then you got the other small one at the back which goes to your throttle body. I'm going to do that one, pushing it all the way on, and you've got this big one here, but I'm going to leave that one off until I put the back one on. That way you can get in there with our pliers and actually get your clamps back on properly. So cruise in with your pliers, and as I said, it's now time to put all the hose clamps back on properly. Lining the little clamp up with your fingers and then dragging it forward, letting it seal. So the two at the back are done. Now we can push these ones on, grabbing your pliers, giving them a nice squeeze, and letting it sit nice and flush. Last one just here, bringing it forward. This one needs a tight squeeze, bringing it forward right over the hose and letting it rest. And there you go guys, all your hoses at the back are back on nice and tight. Alrighty guys, so you've now got your housing back in, all your hoses are on. Let's bring our cap back around. So as you guys probably see, it has a gasket still on it. The gasket actually looks like it's in good condition. So I'm going to reuse it. I advise you don't. I can keep an eye on this car closely as it's just my daily driver. And if it doesn't leak with my gasket glue, then no harm done. But I would advise getting a new gasket for this part of the job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this surface. I'm also going to let the surface dry, because right now there's actually coolant in this hose. And get all this water out. Even if I've got to get an air gun out and really give it a good blow, let it dry. I'm going to put some gasket glue all around here, not too much, just the same as we did in the other one. Let it set for about 10 minutes, and I'm going to put that cap back on, and then we'll put the wiring back in, etc, 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 and that would then be job complete, guys. Let's jump into it. Putting the bolts in before you place the housing onto the blue goo will allow it to seal perfectly the first attempt, if you know what I mean. You won't be scraping it around and moving all the blue goo around. So you can see I've lined up 2 bolts. Now I'll let it rest, and I'll go and get the rest of my little bolts that we're going to be putting in. From memory, there's 4, isn't there? Yep. One's longer than the other. I think this one on this side is the longer one, from memory. And once you've got them all started, you can slowly tighten them up like so. You want to tighten around the edges first. And then once you can see how the blue goo pops out the edges, this is a good sign, especially if it's consistently around the edges. That way it's going to be a nice seal. No leaks are going to spring. Alrighty guys, so let that dry for a while. Everything will seal up nicely. And as you might already expect, it's time to bring our main hose back around. I'm going to tip the coolant out if there is any, just to continue to let it dry. There's nothing in there. So I'm going to place this hose back on. It's looking good. I'm going to use our little pliers, spread them right out, crimp it down. This bloody torch is in the way, dragging it forward, letting it seat nicely. Guys, so at that point your thermostat housing is actually back on. So it's just the same steps in reverse. We're going to begin to bring all of our wiring loom back down, putting it all into position. So the most important one are the coils plugs. So I'm going to see if I can get that on gently without breaking it, which I have. Now you can see this plug is already broken, so I'm going to have to line up little terminals, which I have managed to do, pushing them into place, and hopefully that runs nicely. Guys, do not forget the little 10mm little strap. This assists with obviously the ignition and the earthing. So we're going to put that 10mm in. You want to be gentle around this area. This will actually cause you more dramas than the thermostat housing itself. We've got our 10mm. We want to position that wire nice and flat. Tightening it up, pretty firm. So remember that can go on there. I'm sure you guys can work that out. You can then plug your little plug here back in, which holds the loom nice and tight. Remember this little coil plug. So I'm going to put that on there. Now a lot of people like to put a zip tie here to just strengthen up this area. A zip tie like that to stop everything from moving. But other than that, guys, you can see that everything's sitting quite well. Down here you had your little thing, you can put it back around. I'm going to bring the torch out just so we can begin to put it all back together nicely. You have that bracket that we removed. I'm going to bring that back into place. The wires run underneath it. 3 bolts. They're all 12mm and they'll all be a little rusty. considering the position they're in. Now they are 12 mils, so what do? We swap back over to our 12 mil. One, two, three. Tightening them up too much, a bit, but not too much. Right, so now it's time to bring our battery box back in. Don't forget, there's 4 bolts that attach it into place. So grab them in your hand, bring your battery box down. So it's looking like that earth wire actually doesn't go under the battery box. So that wire there doesn't run underneath this area. So I'm going to put it back on top. And the same thing in reverse. 1, 2, tightening them down pretty well. Now it's time to bring our battery box in. You can see that these cables, they just want to sit there, run around. Even into the box itself, just like that. Lining them up into place. One here. One there. And one there. Tightening them up properly. Okay, so at this point it's now time to put our air intake back in. Now, hopefully you haven't forgotten how to do that. It's still fairly straightforward. Basically just pops in there, goes over your throttle body. You put your 2 10 mils in the front, tightening up the hose clamp at the back. We're gonna see if we can go kind of like that. Remember, it kind of also has to tuck down in here as well. So I'm gonna put it on the throttle body first, like so. Now I'm gonna use a bit of muscle and just tuck it in there, lining it up down here. Okay, so now that that's in, we're gonna make sure that all of our wiring is all still perfectly accessible to come up to the top. Don't forget, it's now time to put your 2 mounting 10 mils in. You line up one here. Might be a bit hard to line up to start. So it's time to swap over to our 10 mil. Just here. Tightening up nicely. Like so. So at this point, we want to come into our throttle body, tighten up our throttle body clamp. No clicks on the rattle gun, it should just tighten up nice and easy. Taking our 10 mil off, hopefully. Putting our little breather pipe back onto the rocker cover. Remember, adjust the little alligator clip to suit. Then at this point, we're going to bring our battery back into place. This big girl here, placing it down gently. I'm going to put our positive terminal back on, give it a few little taps, and we're actually going to tighten that up. We're going to leave our negatives off for now. The reason I'm going to tighten that up because I want to get that on and out of the way. And then the final step is to place our little hose clamp, battery clamp down into position. Because once it's in position, you then want to swap the 12 mil onto your rattle gun, cruise down in there. And you can see as I tighten it up, the battery actually pops itself into position. At this point, we can now bring our negative terminal over. And you can see that the car wants that power, it draws it, so don't worry about the little sparks. And then obviously tighten her up. Can't really get in there with a rattle gun, so I'm just gonna tighten it up nicely with these pliers. There you go there, it's nice and firm. Then, of course, it's now time to check your wiring. Remember, there's one little oxygen sensor and maybe a camshaft sensor down here that needs to be plugged in. One here. There's your camshaft and here's your oxy. 1 and 2. Making sure your coil pack is still plugged in properly, especially if you've got brittle wiring. Fill it up with coolant. Fire it up, and then we'll prime the cooling system. We'll go from there. Alrighty guys, so you've let the all the gasket glue dry and everything else is completed. You've actually started your car now for about a couple seconds and just made sure that it runs fine, nothing electrical, and there's no engine lights on the dash, etc, etc. It's now time for us to prime the cooling system. Right guys, so in order to properly prime the cooling system, you guys have a thermostat, so you're going to need to get it up to operating temperature. So first things first, we're going to begin to pour the water or the coolant, up to you. I choose water. Until obviously it fills up the radiator. Right, so I'm now going to fire up the Getz. Now we're going to continue putting more water in it as it runs, and it'll keep sucking it down. So as you can see there, that the radiator was just filled for a second, and then all of a sudden it sucked back down again. So of course I'm going to keep topping it up until we keep getting that effect happening. You see the air bubbles popping up through the top. That's all your air escaping. That's what we're looking for. So once you get to a stage like this, you could then put your radiator cap on. And what that will do is allow positive pressure to begin to form within the system, circulating all the water around. That's really what we're looking for. I want to see it circulating through the whole motor freely without any air escaping. Alrighty guys, so I've let it get up to operating temperature, and hoping that you have as well. I've had a feel of our two hoses, and they both feel about even temperature. The bottom one will of course be cooler than the top one. Alrighty guys, so if you finished the job, you'll find that hopefully the little blue coolant light has now turned off on your dash. That was just indicating that the car's coolant is currently cold. It's just part of the warming up procedure. Now you'll also find that some of the coolant might have sucked out of your coolant bottle. That's fine, just top it up to the right level, and yeah, take it for a drive and then recheck the coolant bottle again. Don't check the radiator cap, just the coolant bottle. Other than that guys, I hope everything has gone smoothly. I hope that everything is all nice and sealed, providing you did all the blue goo properly, etc, etc. Oh, and one last thing, I hope that all the wiring is all in good nick. You haven't destroyed any plugs. If you do need the plugs for the core pack, we also stock them at partsfactoryoz.com.au, so check that out if you require them. But other than that, if you appreciate the video guys, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and if you can, give it a thumbs up. That way I know you're interested in this type of content. Alrighty guys, my name's Lucas, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.